Hi, accountability partners. David Halford of Mastery Consulting. Let's talk about 5 steps to world-class sales. When I was back in my 20s and early 30s, I had a sales mentor in my retail jewelry days by the name of Randy Poe. And Randy was exceptional in his sales technique and the way he courted people and just closed a tremendous volume of transactions. And I learned from him this 5-step organization to a sales appointment or sales presentation. Are you ready? If you're taking notes, jot these down. If you're not taking notes, jot this down anyway. Very important. Step number 1. I think you already know this one. If I asked you, what's the most important thing that we do first when we're on an appointment or a sales presentation? Yes, it's to build rapport, right? This is all about them. If you remember from the great sales Bible of 1936, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, basically every chapter of the book is, it's all about them. Step number 1 is we need to build rapport. And how do we build rapport? Well, let's step outside of this for a minute. In a world-class sales presentation, in the first half of the presentation, what percentage of the conversation is being done by the sales presenter, and what percentage of the conversation is being done by the prospect? And yes, you guessed it, it's mostly the prospect. In the first half of a sales presentation, you or I, the presenter, will be doing maybe only 20%-ish of the talking. They will be doing 80%. And how do we do this? By asking questions. Or as John Maxwell says in his terrific book, great leaders ask great questions. Now, the problem is most of you are taught by experts in your field to ask the typical superficial questions to gauge the potential client's motivation. And yeah, you need to ask those questions, but we got to get way past that. We've got to ask them questions just not beyond the motivation, also into their backstory and their personality and their relationship and their quirks. And so we get to know them and build a relationship, because this is not about a transaction. This is about a relationship. And after all, if we build rapport with them, do you understand the objective of this transaction is not to close a deal? If you just close a transaction and get a commission check, whatever that transaction is, or an earnings check, the hourly rate probably wasn't worth it when you take into consideration all the leads you went through and the follow-up and the problems and challenges in the transaction and with the client. The truth of the matter is the hourly rate's not that good. You just have a high-paying job. But if you want to build a spectacular business, what you want is for those people to lead you to 5 or 10 other transactions in the next 5-10 years, if that makes any sense, right? The purpose of a business is to get customers who get customers. Let me repeat that. The purpose of a business is to get customers who get customers. And the way you're going to do it is by building rapport, step 1. Because if they know you, like you, and trust you, they're not only likely to do transactions with you, but if you build a terrific relationship in the future with them and keep in touch frequently, I might add, yes, they will send you people. And those 5 or 10 people they send you in the next 5 to 10 years cost you absolutely no time, absolutely no money. There is no greater leverage in business. Step 1, build rapport by asking questions and listening. Okay. Step number 2, are you ready? Find the pain. Find the pain. What does that mean? It means people are motivated by fear of loss and by the pressure of pain far more than they are by the opportunity of gain. Find their pain. And how we do that? We do that by continuing to ask questions. So as we're building rapport, we're asking that potential client, what's the thing that concerns you the most about this transaction? Or what in the past gave you trouble? Why did you even reach out to me, right? I sometimes like to do this when I'm on appointments with potential new coaching clients. Okay, you reached out to me. What's the thing that bothered you so much that you actually decided to pick up the phone, right? Find the pain. Step number 3, stay in the pain. Push the pain button. Number 3, push the pain button. What does that mean? It means continue to have a discussion about the point of pain. Why do you want to do that? Because if they understand that you understand their pain, you don't even have to solve the pain, by the way, or the problem. You just have to understand it. If they know that you understand it, they're presuming you have the solution for it. Now, how do you stay in the pain? How do you push the pain button? By just asking more questions about it. If a potential client tells me, Dave, I can't get myself to do the things I need to do, I might say something like, I know. That's a very common problem. Geesh, what an issue it is out there. Tell me more about that if you don't mind. And we'll engage in that conversation. The more painful it is for folks, the more likely they're going to be to want to take action. Okay, step number 4. Now, step number 4, we're kind of going towards the second half of the great sales presentation. So now they've had their opportunity to share, and you've probed, and you've gotten into even their personal story. Now it's your turn to share a little bit more. So in the second half of a world-class sales presentation, you might be speaking 50-50 with them, or you might do most of the talking. But step number 4 for me is tell your story. Tell your story? What does that mean? Aren't we supposed to sell our product and say what distinguishes us from the competition? Well, yeah, but marketing is broadcasting to far more people, far more frequently, both who you are and what you do. Both who you are and what you do. Therefore, when you tell your story, you want to share with them both who you are, some of your personal background, and what you do, your professional background. So for me, there's actually 3 steps to telling a story. Ready? Step number 1, I like a little bit of resume background. A couple of bullet points, very quick, 30 seconds or so to tell, so they have an idea of where you're coming from. So my version of this, this is my pretty version of the story, some of you have heard before is, went to Yale, went to work for an investment bank, bought Crescent Jewelers, was there for about 10 years, became the chief operating officer in my early 30s, left there to run a database marketing company, and that kind of thing. Just short bullet points, 30 seconds, okay? Step 2 of telling your story is what I like to call dollarizing. Dollarizing is using facts or figures to show your excellence or expertise in that particular area of business. So, for example, I might say to you, well, facts or figures, I started working with my brother-in-law who had asked for help with his business and with some of his friends. And those friends, those 7 people I started working with, went from 17 million in gross volume in 2013 to 37 million in 2014 to 78 million in 2015. True story, by the way. That particular company's owner invited me, after I was actually coaching them pro bono for 8 months, invited me, said, look, I have to pay you for this. You're doing a great job with them. Can I introduce you to more groups? And he set up 5 groups for me to meet with on a weekly basis, introduced me to some vendor clients who hired me as well. It spread from there. And literally as of today, I am personally coaching in more than 40 offices in person, literally weekly or biweekly, in addition to phone coaching clients, the accountability program, etc. Okay, listen to me carefully. The dollarizing was 17 million to 37 million to 78 million. The dollarizing was in more than 40 offices physically. Dollarizing is using facts and figures to establish your expertise. So people are like, oh my goodness, I would be a fool if I didn't use that person. Does that make sense? Okay. The third piece of, or part of telling your story is your value and your values, both who you are and what you do, your value and your values. What I like to do is tell a little story about why, when I work with people, often their business has improved dramatically. And I like to go through a little speech I like to call the 5 levers of business. But in that story, I'll also share a little bit about my wife and our family and what things work for business people. So I'm sharing both business tools and skills, if you will, but also some personal stories to allow people to connect. So telling your story involves a couple different elements, but just remember, if you want to just keep it simple, it's who you are and what you do. That's it. Yeah, but you said, Dave, there are 5 steps to a sales presentation. That was only number 4. I know. Most people say number 5 is the close, but I don't agree with that. Why? Because at the end of step 4, they've decided. Look, when you're meeting with somebody, once they've shared their story, you found their pain button, you've allowed them to share, you got in their backstory, their family life, their etc., and then you have a chance to share a little of your value and your values. Listen to me carefully, kids. They have now made a decision without a shadow of doubt. Yes, I want to work with you. No, I don't want to work with you. Or I'm not sure, I still have a couple of questions. So here's your close. Are you ready? A classic generalist sales close. Step number 5. You could say something like this. Do it in your own style, of course. At this point, some people have decided, yes, I definitely want to get started. If you want to get started, we'll go to work right now on those steps. Step number 2, some people say, you know what, thank you so much for your time, but I'm not interested. And if that's the case, really appreciate your time. And if you ever have a change of heart, just let me know. Third kind of person says, you know what, I think I might like to do something with you, but I have a few more questions. And if you have more questions, let's take all the time in the world you need right now to get your questions answered clearly so you can make a yes or a no decision for yourself. And by the way, that's your classic 5-step sales approach. Now, one thing I want you to know is Your job is not to close everyone that moves. Your job is to present to everyone that moves. That's why marketing is all about the quantity of appointments you go on, right? Your job is to present to everyone that moves and let them select or deselect you. Okay, this was a good video, a healthy long video for you. My question for you today is, having gone through the 5 steps of a world-class sales presentation, what might you do differently in your business now in order to achieve greater results?